I wanna try climbing the ranks. What the hell's going on with Jazz? I wanted to do this in during Nexus 2. Only 11? 45 size deck too. What the hell could this be? It might just be that they're playing on a budget.
My present. You're supposed to every card.
Okay, what the hell?
Card game, hobby, if you're gonna play with your friends, or but you're probably gonna ask the first thing, which is, what are you supposed to do? And generally for card games, the recommend.
Oh my god, it's DDD.
Unless, of course, you're playing Commander, but if you're playing Commander, that's a whole separate can of worms. I'm not gonna get into Commander in this video. That's far too out of the scope for me. So today, we're gonna be talking about Magic, Hearthstone, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and I'm gonna explain to you how you're supposed to get to it in all three. So, we're gonna start off with Magic here. Now, Magic, you start with a cool 20 life. Your goal is to reduce your opponent's life to 0 before yours gets reduced to 0. Now, you may ask, how are you supposed to get your opponent's life to 0? That's where spells and sorceries are going to come in. That spell with Lightning Bolt here simply does 3 damage to a creature or to a player. So, if you play on your Lightning Bolt, deal 3 damage, they're down to 17, that much closer to winning. And then you also have the reverse effect. You got this card, Chapter of Blessing here, 1 mana, 5 life, so now you're 5 life further away from dying. The overhealing, so you can play this card anytime, it'll put a little bit of a buffer for your dying. Now, that being said, while spells and sorceries are pretty good at inflicting helping, and the real meat is the creatures.
Oh my god.
So Spirit, great example. An aggressive creature that's going to kill your opponent powerfully.
This hand is fucking stupid.
And has haste. So when you attack, the turn comes in, immediately applying pressure to your opponent, and it's got the prowess keyword.
Maxi. Show me the Maxi. Ash Blossom, that works too.
This card is a 0-4 defender that can't attack, but attacks it wouldn't be able to get. Now, when this card is on the battlefield, draws you a card, put a free body on the board, and help you protect your life.
Called by.
Use to further bolster your Cards certainly have a direction that they can be hard to play aggressively evolve on, for example. Simply roll evolvements in a more aggressive deck that can still beat that card. Cards like Monstrous Whisper, Block in a Pinch, and Lightning Bolt, though it's generally considered an aggressive card to hit this one in the face, but still use this card to clear the board. There are some strategies that arise from mechanics that go on with that. I'm going to see along now. Generally, it ranges from the fast and slow end of the spectrum, so you have different decks that go at different speed tend to win the game at different times. Starting on the fast end of the spectrum, we got aggro. For your aggro decks, you're going to have classic, aggressive, small creatures. Here's one from standard that we got right now called Higher Claw. It's a 1/2, and whenever you attack with it or any other lizard that you have, it deals 1 damage to your opponent. And it also has an activated ability that benefits if your opponent has lost life on the turn. This card benefits a lot from attacking a lot, and reducing your opponent's life total to activate its ability, and also just applies a lot of damage to your opponent. Aggro decks are also
You can't negate it this time.
A lot of removal spells that are dealing damage, so cards like Shock and Lightning Bolt from earlier are really powerful for not only going to your opponent's face and finishing them off when they're at 2 life or less, and they are also effective for clearing your opponent's small minions off the board, allowing your cards like Higher Claw to attack it more frequently. In addition to making your creatures attack more frequently, Monster's Rage is another example of what is called a pump spell. This card you can play on your creature, and it'll give it a stat buff that'll allow you to attack into your opponent more regularly and more aggressively, dealing damage directly to your opponent's face if nothing's in the way. Then we have the mid-range decks on the side of the spectrum. These plan to win the game at a more slow pace, but not quite so slow as a slower controlling deck we're going to see later. Deep Cavern Bat is a great example of a mid-range creature that's seeing a lot of play in standard right now. This 2-mana 1/1 has flying and lifelink, meaning it gains you life when it hits your opponent, and also gains you life when it enters into combat with any creatures. Therefore, you can gain life against more aggressive decks to kind of bolster yourself. Not to mention that it has an ability that attacks your opponent's hand by removing any online cards.
Fancy Blue, the Candle is going to stay face down there.
Key pieces that they need to win the game, and against aggro decks, you can play it down as they're gaining life to keep up with their aggressive pushes. Go for the Throat is an example of a removal spell that many mid-range decks like to run. This card says destroy any non-artifact creature, meaning against aggressive decks you can kill their small guys for relatively cheap at only 2 mana, so you can keep up on board with them and not die, and against slower controlling decks you can hold Go for the Throat until your opponent plays a irrelevant creature that you want to kill with it. Anything bigger than 2 mana will give you a powerful discount because you only paid 2 mana for the Go for the Throat, and they probably paid much more. This is also a deck where you're very reasonable to see lots of Planeswalkers seeing play, as Planeswalkers generally range from the 3 to about 6 mana range, and have several effects that benefit you in multiple situations. Liliana of the Veil, for example, here, has an uptick that makes both players discard a card, and if both players are discarding cards, that means that you can dump your whole hand onto the field and force your slower control opponents to discard their valuable cards from their hand when they have no other option to. However, Liliana also has a -2 that forces a player to sacrifice a creature, meaning that against aggressive decks, you can reduce their creature count by playing down Liliana, making them get rid of one of their creatures. If they only have one creature, this means that Liliana will be a threat on board that they'll have to answer in the game later, and also protect your life total by taking damage. Planeswalkers, super powerful, and definitely home in mid-range decks. Now we're going to get to the slowest end of the spectrum, and the decks that plan to win absolutely late game, the control decks. Control decks will play cards like Deduce, which allows them to draw cards. This card specifically draws and then investigates as well, giving you a clue that you can use to draw additional cards. These little control decks love just drawing many cards and running your opponent out of cards when you simply have more from cards like Deduce. Now, these decks do struggle with aggro and mid-range decks trying to kill them before they can set up their value engines. So they play cards like Sunfall, which allow them to exile all creatures, and Sunfall even has the little benefit of giving you an incubate token where X is numbered to the creatures that you exiled. So you get a big creature equal to the number of creatures that you removed by playing the Sunfall, not only stabilizing you, but also giving you a future creature to stabilize you even further. And finally, the most iconic card from control decks has to be cards like 3 Steps Ahead that say counter target spell. This card for 3 mana can beat almost any spell in the entire game unless that spell specifically says it cannot be countered. This way, control deck can pick and choose specifically what they want to answer from their opponent, and also 3 Steps Ahead has even more benefit on top of that because you can both counter spells and use this for value because it both draws cards and creates clones of creatures that you have in play currently. This card really does it all and shows why control is so powerful in the late game. If you can activate all 3 of these effects on a card like this, you will easily outrun your opponent in terms of card advantage. There are some notable exceptions to the 3 basic standard speeds and decks that run along those times in Magic. That's, for example, we have a ramp deck. So ramp decks tend to play cards like the Heat Harvest here, which allow you to search your deck for a land and immediately put it into play. And not only does Heat Harvest do this once, you can do it twice when you sacrifice it again. This way, you can basically skip the mid-game portion of the game by early game playing cards like Heat Harvest, and then the mid-game portion of the game gets completely bypassed because you have additional lands to cast additionally large creatures. A great example of a large creature is Atraxa Grandian card. This one is seeing an absolute ton of play in Magic right now, and this card is a 7/7 for 7 mana. Big stats already, however it has a bunch of powerful keywords like Flying, Lifelink, Vigilance, and Death Touch. Not to mention that when Atraxa comes in, it gives you a bunch of additional cards off the top of your deck and puts them into your hand. So by playing cards like Heat Harvest, you can ramp up to a card like Atraxa, and even though you spent a bunch of cards doing nothing but putting lands into play, it doesn't matter because you can slam down Atraxa, refill your hand, and give yourself a big lifelink Clinking Body to hold off aggro decks. These decks are also very popular in using cards like Hedge Maze here or other powerful lands with special effects by having a land into
The hell?
tap.
I felt like I was fighting nothing but super powerful decks. But now, why do I feel like I'm getting ranked with all the scrubs? Well, I mean, I did lose to a Mikanko.
Or you want to draw a ton of lands in your ramp deck.
These are AI.
We have combo, and it was hard to find cards that really combo in standard or combo decks.
These are AI.
Older formats.
I'm fighting AI.
So we have combat cards in the deck. This card is a classic card that for specific things set up your combos in your deck. One of the combos is that doesn't become land. Through the reach, find that card, plus a creature. Act right away. However, have to sacrifice worthwhile as an action. This creature entire game start the 50 and a 50. It's flying and protecting all this foes. So
oh my god, Cyframe Gear.
Annihilator Keeper forces your opponents have 6 in their preference. This card, combined with Further Breed, number of other cards in search for smart to deck, basically allow you to dome your opponent 5 or less life and force them to sacrifice most of the cards in board. This is how combo with sidesteps or idea of slow, fast, and effective. All of these decks are basically focused on timing, whereas combo all focus on combo as fast as possible. So I'm going to talk a bit about Hearthstone. So on Hearthstone, we're still trying to however, start with it. Bump it up. It's magic. This way, if you play cards that work, right? So how do you get better spells, just like a magic? Like bolt, remember this card? Magic deck has bolts. They just copy the homework. But also does the damn spell start costing.
Okay, well, they are an AI. They sure have a lot of hand traps.
Now, Hearthstone's going to get worse because you seal over your total health of 30 and kill your permanent damage. So, a trade-off. Not to mention, also, of course, that means as your future, it's a little bit healthy, different from the Flaming Creature. For one that does the damage. Classic example, aggressive creature, lay it down, does the damage, and just attack your opponent for the next turn. Help build up tempo over time, but this guy help 3 damage to the opponent. That's counting down defense. Move on to
Stop it.
0-2 and armor and a card. This card with 0 power also cannot attack. However, armor lasts longer in Ender deck. Card lasts longer in C4 decks. Now, just like magic, no hard and fast.
Oh my god, 2 effect Veilers.
Aggro deck on cards that push through your win cons. Money up the trade off against them. For defensive purposes, it's totally acceptable. Playing bolts in flat field. Aggressive and defensive additions, this mechanic. About the strategy, so Hearthstone also has the same system as all and fast, slow archetypes still apply to the aggro decks. You have a similar card here. I'll play the 1 mana. The Naga, it's not a wizard, so it's a 1/3. Spell, it's +1 attack. And not only is the card to kill, also, on space, exactly what you do. That can also run power spells like a bunch of bananas. As an example of a good pump spell on Hearthstone allows you to +1/+1 up to 3 times.
Okay.
Hearthstone is less combat will bump to go over your opponent's minions, but it is used before combat.
Konami AI
Or clear off a minion
failed connection.
And finally, we got this card Death Roll here. It destroys an enemy minion, deals damage equal to its attack.
One more game.
Classic aggro card. You're going to play this down, you're going to kill their biggest thing, do a bunch of damage to your opponent, damage the face, and clearing the way for your other smaller minions to get the face even more. Now, we also have an in-range report. We're following along here. We got High Ho Silverwing. This is a 2 mana 2/1 with Divine Shield, and when it dies, you draw a Holy Spell. Spell like Power and almost all their spells are Holy Spells, but when you play this thing down, it covers both halves of the game. When it's stacked aggro decks, it's a 2/1 with Divine Shield. Powerful presence, and to clear off aggressive minions from your opponent. Control decks, this guy draws a card, and in the late game, if you draw him, you're not a dead draw, because he basically refunds himself for absolutely free. Great example of the mid-range card here. Another one coming in, Horn of the Widow. This one's a 6 mana 3/4 weapon. Flip it to your hero, and when you attack twice, because it has a win theory. Now, this weapon also has the stat that when the hero attacks a minion, it's into a 3/3, Horn will kill it by itself. This has many applications, and in a classic mid-range example, if you just use this card to hit your opponent in the face against the slow controlling deck, you can apply overall 12 damage worth of damage. Your opponent with the horns is a large chunk if you've been pressuring them all game. However, if they've been aggressive against you all game, you don't have that much damage in your opponent's face, you can Tornado Windlord as a control tool to clean up your opponent's board, draw minions no matter what the size. Tornado Windlord, great mid-range card here. And then we have the ultimate mid-range card you can ask me found in right now. We got Amethyst, the Peacekeeper. This is a 7-mana 1/8 with taunt, meaning your opponent can't attack you unless they get through the taunt. And it also makes it so that way your minions can't take more than 2 damage, meaning that if they want to clear Amethyst of minions, they have to attack it at least 4 times. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that Amethyst is a Titan, which means it has a bunch of powerful abilities, like for example Reinforced. So if you're against a slower controlling deck, you can play an Amethyst and immediately draw 2 cards. Not only do you draw 2 cards, you set their health, cost, and attack to 2, meaning you get really big powerful minions with big effects for very cheap. But also, use the other half of it. If you're struggling with an aggro deck, you can use Pacify, reducing all of their minions to 2 attack and 2 health. This way, you're going to have a lot easier time surviving through the onslaught of minions from your opponent and reducing them all to really low. Finally, we have Empower. If you're against a slow deck, or if you're against an aggro deck and you're winning and you already have a board, you can use this to buff up all your minions and apply a lot of damage to face or to clear the board. Lots of flexibility, that's what mid-range is known for. Finally, we have the control decks. If you want to play a control deck, you're probably going to play cards here like Buttons. This card comes into play and it draws you a spell from each spell school. You draw up to 5, 6, 7 cards in a ridiculous situation from Buttons. Super powerful card here, and it's 4 mana, 4 pretty decent stats. So, this is an example just like the Deuce from the previous game where you can play this guy down and draw a bunch of cards. Now, once again, if you're drawing a bunch of cards, you're probably going to need cards to kill your opponent's things, and we got Army of the Dead. This one removes 5 of your corpses, which means
I don't like
5
this.
have died previously to be playing Army of the Dead. Not that big of a cost.
I'm gonna get to Diamond because they keep
2 2s with Rush for each corpse that you spend. This way, you can play this card down, summon about 10 damage worth of Rush. Rush just means you can't hit your opponent.
Alright, be a real person. I'd like to at least, if I lose, that's at least proof that I...
And finally, for control, there are often these cards that we call finishers. So Climatic the Product Explosion is a classic example of a finisher for a control deck. This 10-mana card deals 6 damage and summons 3 2/2. Doesn't sound that good. However, it has Lifesteal, giving you a bunch of life when you cast the spell, making it last longer in such aggro decks, and improves every time you spend a corpse.
Wait, what?
The numbers on the card go up. So you do extra damage, summon more souls, and your souls will be bigger. All of these things make it a super powerful control finisher and something that you're willing to build your entire deck around, just so that when you can get to this final card and blow your opponent out the water. Now, just like in Magic, Hearthstone has exceptions. You'll see this about almost every card game. There's always exceptions to the rule.
Oh my god, they don't have any interactions.
Ramp mostly, classified in the Druid class, but we have this card that's been causing problems. Splish Splash Whelp. It's a 3-mana 3/2, and when it comes into play, if you have a dragon in your hand, which you almost always will, because, it's a dragon deck, you want to have a dragon, it'll give you a free mana crystal. That dragon will be accelerating you to later game plays, skipping you through that mid-range part of the game. You have another card that has a similar effect here, Summer Flower Child. It says Finale. They cost 1 less, and it draws you 2 cards that cost 6 or more. Play this guy down on 5, draw 2 cards that cost 6 or more, and then if it's the last mana you spend, it costs 1 less. Probably play it down on the next turn, so you can get big effects for relatively cheap. Playing Splish Splash Whelp and Summer Flower Child is definitely scary turn 3 into turn 4 card, and then also Summer Flower Child refills you if you put cards in Splish Splash Whelp that cost you a card for relatively little stats or little board presence. This card will catch you up in terms of harder damage side of that. Now, if you want to catch up in terms of the board presence side of that, ER is what's going to hook you up. This is another massive ramp payoff, 10 mana for a 5/7, which sounds pretty small, but each time you use any ability on you, all of which are insane, you get a 5/5 with taunt, basically giving 10-12 worth of stats for 10 mana by default. And I haven't even gotten into the abilities, which is where the card gets really crazy. Because one of the abilities is to give you all the mana back, basically making this card a 0 mana 10-12. So that's probably one of the better abilities to do. But even if you don't have anything else to do, you can still use this for super powerful effects, such as restoring your hero to full health. Have you been struggling all game and you're about to die? Well, you just click Bountiful Harvest, and all of a sudden, you're not going to die anymore. Sounds pretty good. And finally, we have the card Spontaneous Growth that you can get off of this thing, which allows you to draw until you have a full hand. Basically, if ER is the absolute last card in your hand, it'll still give you a massive amount of value and a huge board purchase. The card really does everything. Combo, another classic archetype that Hearthstone just basically copied from Magic. I mean, no, it's not Hearthstone. It's a little bit complicated, but we're not going to get into it here. Combos in Hearthstone are a little bit different from combos in Magic, because you have this thing called spell damage, which makes it so that your spells do more damage. So gaining +1 spell damage means your spells will do +1 damage. Pretty straightforward to follow that there. Now, because they only do +1 damage, you're going to want to cast several spells at the same turn. Using cards like Lifebinder's Gift, this becomes achievable. This card reduces the cost of all the spells in by 1. By reducing the cost of all your spells in hand, you can spam many spells that you want all at the same time. So if you combine this with Permanent Sparkling File, which allows you to do 2 damage, up to 3 from Magical Dollhouse, or if you have a couple of them, also discounts the next card you play on this turn by the amount of damage. So if you can spell damage, it's the cost of the Sparkling File, a large mana discount in addition to the damage the Sparkling File already is allowing you to play. Massive, spammy, multiple card combos, bursting your opponent down constantly. Alright, now it's time for you. Now Yu-Gi-Oh! You're still trying to get to 0, that's the common thing amongst all these leagues, trying to get 2 to 0. But the difference is you start from 8,000, which is a little bit, I don't know if you noticed, it's a little bit more, but don't worry. It's not that different from other card games because they accounted for this by making the damage numbers very much more fitting. That's how we do it. You got spells and then traps. So, equivalent to spells in Magic, or equivalent to spells in Hearthstone. Have this trap card, Secret Barrel, which can flip up and deal 200 damage to your opponent for each card in their hand and on their side of the field, usually dealing a decent chunk of damage. Friend spells tend to be weaker in Yu-Gi-Oh! In comparison to other games. Now, talking about weaker, light gate spells also tend to be weaker in Yu-Gi-Oh! This is an incredibly weak example in Wu Yang Curry, but a classic example of a card that gains you life. This one only gives you 200, which is effectively nothing. This card doesn't deserve the slot it fills, but there are other lightning cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! And most of them heal for a decent amount, but not tons. Now we have the monster cards. Now this is Yu-Gi-Oh!'s bread. While spell and traps are classic, monsters are where you're at the end. Look at this monster, your Blackluster Soldier Envoy at the beginning. This is an iconic monster. It's got 3,000 attack points, meaning it chunks your opponent for a third of their life by himself. Not to mention, he can special summon himself out, basically summon for free if you have a light and a dark monster in your graveyard. Not only that, but he also has a really powerful effect, allowing you to either banish a monster from the field, destroying anything at the cost of your attack, or you can say that ELS here can attack 2 times, basically chunking your opponent for almost all of their life in 1 turn. So, because Yu-Gi-Oh! Has no summoning fitness mechanic, and because this guy can summon them up for free, this is one of the most powerful cards in the game. It's pretty easy to see why. If you play this card out any turn before turn 1, or even on turn 1, for example, you can definitely get a massive amount of this card.
It was a sang.
What?
What?
The defensive card we got here, Wind Up Set Maze. This card is an XYZ monster, which means 2 monsters that are level 3. Put them together to make this
Negate
guy, which is a pile of cards that you have access to all the time. Now, you summon this guy, he's got a higher defense.
Are they playing a 2008 structured deck?
The defense stat is the one that gets inflicted on him, rather than his attack stat. Not to mention that he can't attack when he's in defense position, obviously, but that is the trade-off he's able for the defensive card. Now, this card also has an ability that if you were destroyed, you can move a material from this card, and during the end phase, if you did do that, you can destroy a card on the field. Super powerful effect here, you play this guy down.
I can't accept this.
Start destroying your opponent's things. It's a huge pain to deal with, and definitely a good example of card defensively. Now, that being said, I'm talking about cards played offensively, cards played defensively. It doesn't really matter that much in Yu-Gi-Oh! You have hard, fast rules that basically don't exist. You can play aggressive cards defensively and play defensive cards aggressively. It just depends on not only your deck, the situation your deck finds itself in, and the matchup you're against. Now, here's the thing about Yu-Gi-Oh! Strategies. Doesn't really go along the fast, medium, slow route the other 2 card games I've shown you now, because it's really nuanced. You have a generic extra deck, which is basically that there's cards in the extra deck that almost
Marshmallow!
any matchup. One I remember seeing distinctly is Baron here. Baron the Flourish says once per turn, target 1 card on the field and destroy it. Powerful card, lay down, and on once while face up on the field.
It's also banned.
You can activate this on your opponent's turn. You can negate the activation of a card or effect. And believe it or not, your opponent will want to use effects and play cards during the course of the game.
I finally top decked you.
This guy down, which only costs 1 tuner and 1 non-tuner.
Maybe just
summon,
in time.
Basically, that any single deck in the entire game could get to this guy if they wanted to, and use this guy, destroy something, and negate something from your opponent. Not to mention that he's also just a really big guy, 3,000 attack point. Remember, that's 1/3 of your opponent's life on 1 hit from these 2, and he can attack right away because there's no summoning sickness in Yu-Gi-Oh! Super powerful card. Now, this card is probably banned when you should be. But we got examples of other cards that are super powerful here. We got SD Little Knight here. This is a card that you can summon with 2 effect monsters, and it's not that big, only 1,600. However, if you use a Link, a Fusion, a Synchro, or an XYZ to summon this card, you can use its ability to banish a card on the field, and also banish a card on your side of the field, and then come back later. Now, this effect is definitely less powerful than Baron we saw earlier. However, by using effects like SD Little Knight, disrupt your opponent's plays, and you can get things that are really hard to get
Max C still activated.
low cost of 2 effect monsters. because effect monsters...
I'm playing against
Well, basically,
Kashira.
every monster that you're going to see in Yu-Gi-Oh! Tends to be an effect monster because monsters with effects tend to be pretty good. So SP Moonlight, really easy generic option that you basically slot into any deck. And it gets even stronger when paired with this next card, Icon Masquerade. So Icon Masquerade is two non-link monsters. Once again, this literally could be almost anything you want. Almost all monsters in the game are non-link monsters. So that's a pretty simple thing to require. And also, during your opponent's phase, when you have Icon Masquerade up, really low attack stat rate. However, before your opponent can do anything on your main phase, you use her ability to link summon a link monster using materials on your side of the board, meaning that you can summon SP Link on your opponent's turn. And not to mention, when you summon SP Link, she immediately gets rid of something. So if your opponent's comboing off, you have Icon Masquerade in play, send her away another effect monster, summon out your SP Link, and boom. You can answer any monster on your opponent's side of the field right away, whenever you want, generically from the extra deck, every single deck. This is a classic part of Yu-Gi-Oh! That is permanent and prominent in many a deck. So, you got the generic cards that you can see slotted in any deck, and then we have the archetype-specific cards. Now, Yu-Gi-Oh! has way too many archetypes to go through. I could never get through them all in one video. Now, if that's a video you want me to make, let me know, because I do not think I could reasonably go through them all in a short amount of time. But I'm just going to talk about Snake Eye Ash, because this is the deck at the top of the metagame now, and this is the deck that if you're playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Right now, you're going to see this deck. So, this card comes down, it's only a 1-star, so you can summon him basically as you want, and if you normal or special summon him, you can add a level 1 fire monster from your deck to your hand, and then he has some other effects that are powerful, like you can send 2 cards from your control of the graveyard, you can special summon a Snake Eye monster from your deck, so if you have other Snake Eye cards in play, you can use your Snake Eye right away, and then get more Snake Eye stuff, and then the card you're probably going to look for with Snake Eye Ash all the time is this card. Snake Eye probably.
I already know I'm playing Megalith, so...
Start just searching it with Snake Eye, look at that. You can special summon it, and when the card is normal or special summon, you can add a Snake Eye trap spell from your deck to your hand. Look at that, so you get the Snake Eye Ash, which gets you the Popular, which gets you the spell. You want to see the spell? Well, here comes the spell. We got original full spoiled Snake Eye. This card lets you send a face-up card you control through the graveyard, like Snake Eye Ash or Snake Eye Popular, and then you can special summon a level 1 fire monster from your hand or deck. Oh, well, look at that. You think you'll get any level 1 Snake Eye monster from them too. I've already shown you. Now, these cards are notable that you all have once per turn effects on them, meaning that you can't do this forever, because if you haven't noticed, you could loop these forever and get an infinite amount of material off of these cards to summon whatever you want. So, all these cards have once per turn limiters on them. You can't do it more than once per turn. Now, it also has a bunch of other effects. It allows you to, banish the card from the graveyard to get a Snake Eye monster, from the graveyard. You can add level 1 fire monster from your deck to your hand, all these cards just do so many things, and this is why it's so hard to talk about specific archetypes, because every card does like a million things. It's really hard to understand how the deck plays until you either get your hands on it or want to replay it. So you're wondering, okay, so you got all the stuff in the extra deck, those are probably the cards you win the game, or cards that construct your opponent. You got all the main deck cards that are, combo enablers, cards that give you lots of cards out of your deck, you got boss monsters, you're gonna break down and beat up your opponent. What else even is there in the game besides the big things? The hand traps, you got board breakers. These are the ways that Yu-Gi-Oh! Players combat all these powerful combo plays. Pretty classic example here, we got DD Crow. Quick effect, discard the card to your graveyard, target 1 card to your opponent's graveyard, banish it right away. So any card with a graveyard effect that you want to get rid of, you can just send your DD Crow right away, and then boom, card's gone, no longer need to worry about it. Miru, this is definitely one of the hand traps in the game. Look at this guy during main phase. If your opponent normal or special summon 5 little monsters this turn, it's basically if your opponent is trying to combo off, which usually your opponent will do, contribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible if you special summon this card from your hand. So basically, you remove everything, you summon a big Nibiru on your side of the board. Now your opponent does get a little bit of a consolation by getting a primal token on the field, and its power becomes, basically equal to the power of contributed monsters, so your opponent does get a little bit of consolation. But it's not that much consolation when you take away, everything they had, and then you give them one thing. That's definitely a good deal, and you, remember, only have to pay one thing in the Nibiru. Now, if we're talking about hand traps, you definitely got to talk about Ash Blossom of Joyous Spring. This card, and I remember when this card was released, it made waves. So this card, when your opponent activates any of the effects of either adding a card from the deck to your hand, something we saw a ton of the Ash deck right there, special summoning a card from the deck, another thing we saw a ton of the Ash deck there, or send a card from their deck to the graveyard, which definitely we'll see a lot, a lot of different decks, they love to send cards from their deck to the graveyard. Get rid of your Ash from your hand, and you can just negate the effect. So almost all of the super common Yu-Gi-Oh! Decks love to do Ash Blossom-ish effects on their turn, and having Ash Blossom in hand is just a classic way to say, no, I don't think you're going to combo off with that card. No thank you, sir. So, hand traps, definitely one way that you can commence all this chicanery. Now we got board breakers. Winged Dragon of Raw Spear Mode. Now, this card has a lot of text. The only text you really need to read is this requires 3 tributes from either side of the field to normal summon on the side of the field. So, what you can do, means you can summon the Wind Sphere Dragon of Raw mode on your opponent's side of the board by attributing 3 of their monsters, and that way you play 1 card, 1 attributes 3 of their monsters. Boom, problem solved. 3 monsters, doesn't matter if they can't be destroyed by battle or anything. To use this, attribute them off, boom, they're gone, or destroyed. If you want to see a board game destroyed, you can look at this card here, Lightning Storm. This is a spell card that says if you control no face-up cards, which is pretty easy to do if you're going second, you can destroy all attack position monsters your opponent controls, which means that all of the board that they just set up, you can just wipe away right away, or you can destroy all spell and trap cards your opponent controls. So if less board focused and have a bunch of spell traps in the back, you can also destroy all of those. Now you can only use 1 Lightning Storm per turn, but still this card super duper powerful and just completely blowing up everything on your opponent's side of the board. The cards that are hand traps that stop cards like Lightning Storm are a good example of why. There's cards in the game that stop your opponent from doing things, and there's cards in the game that destroy absolutely everything. Super high power level Yu-Gi-Oh! Board breakers. Now, final one I want to talk about is one you can use in your opponent's turn because it's a quick effect that's called Super Polymerization. This wraps back to the first point where, because you have a bunch of generic fusion monsters in your extra deck, discard a card, special summon a fusion monster in your extra deck using monsters from your opponent's side of the field. This way, with Super Polymerization,
that shit, I can't activate Dynamondo's effect either. Oh god.
Up a card because you destroy 2 of your opponent's things at minimum, and you summon your own guy onto the field. So, Super Polymerization, super duper powerful. This card is robust. Alright, finally we're getting into Pokemon, which is the first game where your goal isn't to reduce your opponent's fight total to 0. This game is all about the prize cards, just like Pokemon the video game. So you start with 6 prize cards, and every time
fucking
you have
dimension shifter,
reducing its health points to 0, you get 1 of the prize cards. Now, in most games of Pokemon, you're going to see exceptions to this because you have cards like Iron Thorn EX or Rigid Echo V. These EX and V-type Pokemon actually give you 2 prize cards because of their higher increased power level. You'll see that health damage output is a lot higher than a regular Pokemon, meaning that you get a little bit of an extra bonus when you take them out. Now, how do you knock them out is the real question, because I told you about how the Pokemon work, but how do you actually deal the damage? Well, it's through attacks. You've got attacks of the Pokemon that do damage. Most Pokemon do attacks that do a large amount of damage that can almost one-shot something, or they do a decent amount of damage that could probably 2 or 3-shot something depending on what you're attacking. Now, in order to use your attacks, you need energy. Energy, these guys right here, but there's cards you put in your deck, you put them to your Pokemon, and you can equip 1 of them per turn. Now, each one of these symbols that you have on your Pokemon is how much energy you require to use that attack. Now, you'll see that most decks in the game,
I have no idea what they're playing.
Is to cheat the energy system so that we can power on your attacker as fast as humanly possible. Now, talking about Pokemon archetypes, the first one I want to talk about is the engine decks. Now, most decks...
Well, apparently, that doesn't seem very likely.
Follows up on that strategy that I told you before about cheating out more energy.
Oh my god, it's runic.
This is just the starter Pokemon that you're going to play now. Pretty big and chunky, so we won't get one-shot, and he's a V-Star card, but his upgrade is why you're really liking this card. Lugia V-Star has a super powerful attack called Tempest Dive, which does 220 damage, massive amount of damage.
Wait, they don't have any monsters, do they?
Powerful ability is called Summoning Star. During your turn, you can only activate this once per game because it's a V-Star power, but during your turn, you can search your deck for 2 Pokemon that don't have a rules box anymore. Like, for example, V-Stars, or EX Pokemon, and put them onto your bench. Now, if you have these 2 Pokemon that don't have a rule box, or just come onto your bench, all you want to set up is getting more energy, right? That's where Archeops comes in. This card says once per turn, you can search your deck for up to 2 special energy cards and attach them to one of your Pokemon. Now, if you have 2 of these guys to play, you search for 2 times 2, that's 4. 4 special energy on the start, have enough power to power up your super powerful attack. Not to mention, the Archeops, they get to stick around, so you can keep these guys in play all the time and keep suiting up as many Lugia V-Stars as you can possibly muster over the course of the game. Super powerful engine here, and once you get the V-Star in play and your Archeops in the graveyard, that's when your energy online start going off. Now, in order to get all these cards in the graveyard, like getting Archeops in the graveyard, get Lugia V-Star in your hand, get Lugia V in your hand, get Lugia to play, evolve Lugia, you need support. That's where cards like Ultra Ball come in. This card, super simple, discard 2 cards from your hand, search your deck for any Pokemon and put it in your hand, and shuffle your deck. Super duper simple, let's do. So, time also puts an Archeops. It's no problem, activate this side. This is an item card, many of them on a turn want. From your starting cards, so Ultra Ball cost, however, Professor's feature, support a card, 1 per turn, or the decks are much more valuable. So let's get started. And then draw some cards. So you can discard Archeops or whatever random card, mark card you use on your turn. Draw an additional 7 card, with the full grip and play this blue. Professor's feature, super powerful cards, lost them. And Pokemon Keep has support cards for after the set. So, Professor Richard, all other trainers and supporters to power out threats. tool cards. Look at that. Defiance Man says we can roll Defiance cards. Look this tool. It's 30 more damage. Pokemon. So powering it up to 1-shot or 2-shot Pokemon or wait. How do you do that? Because obviously we're going to want to set up your Pokemon. What is this? All the set up one. A hand is something. It says shuffle your hand. One goes. You should draw cards. Prize cards at me. So you put on this one pile on. So you go one prize card thing. Draw the 6. Big size difference, large card value, and snag a combo. Then bring another one. 130 points. Disassemble under the fan. So few cards.
I don't understand what they're doing. Are they gonna exceed?
And we have probably my favorite example. But one person does have the caveat that it's both destructive and forces your opponent to knock out a Pokemon something field for you. So start with that. It's a true scenario for Island. Play it, shuffle your hand in your deck, your opponent shuffles their deck, you draw 5, they draw 2. So we're going to have a large advantage because you have 3 more cards than your opponent. Plays, set up things, get your combo going. Your opponent has 2 cards, which means that if they don't already have their combo online, or if you've already dismantled their combo, they're going to have a very hard time to keep up. Now, I talked to you about how you're going to stop your opponent's hand, but let's talk about breaking your opponent's board after they've already set up their combo. This card, Boss's Orders, this one's seen playing in basically every deck. It's a classic example. Take one of your opponent's bench Pokemon, make it the active Pokemon, and attack it. So you take that powerful card on the bench that's setting up, maybe you take your Raging Greninja, or Archeops, and pull it to the front, and slam it with your big attack so they no longer have their engine online. You can also snipe the bench in different ways by playing cards like Dragon Ball DX. This card's Phantom Dive Attack not only does a sizable chunk of the Pokemon in front of it, but it also lets you put 6 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon any way you like. So you can basically snipe down small Pokemon that have small effects, or snipe off big Pokemon that have a really big effect over multiple turns. So this way you can basically dismantle your opponent's combo over the course of multiple turns and also punish them for bringing back damaged Pokemon into the backline where you can snipe them down with the Phantom. Finally, we have the board disruption that's the most annoying if you ask me, preventing damage from your opponent's attacks. If you look at this Ogerpon EX here, it says prevent damage done to this Pokemon by your opponent's Pokemon that have an ability. Abilities, you probably notice that Pokemon have powerful abilities that they use to help win the game. But if you play it on this Ogerpon EX here, your opponent's going to have a very hard time getting through because if they don't have a Pokemon with no ability to attack it, they're not going to be able to deal any damage. And in some stages, you can even win the game without attacking at all. Now, this card can block your opponent from doing basically anything. Thanks for watching the video.
Holy shit.
It was an absolute pleasure to make. I love talking about card games. Like and subscribe if you want to see more videos along these lines, talking about the 4 big card games here. Leave a comment if you want. I would feel a pleasure. I love reading all the comments from the last video. It was a great time.
You got all 3!
Oh, one more thing before I go. I read through all of the last video's comments, and I really want to talk about them, so thanks for posting comments. I love to read them every time. Now, I got 4 different types of comments from the last video that I want to address. The first one is comments like this, where they're just complimenting me and saying they like the video and hope I do well. I love these kind of comments. Please, if you enjoy the video, I really appreciate you commenting and liking and subscribing. It means a lot to me, and it's really, thank you so much. Now, I got other comments that say basically, bro, breathe. Shout out to this guy who basically timestamps every time he saw me inhale and exhale. It's definitely a pleasure. Look, I'll try to get better on this. I just naturally have a really fast talking voice. Hopefully this one's a little bit slower, but the more I do YouTube, the more I'll probably get used to talking a bit slower. Thanks for trying to help me out. And then we got this type of comment, which I definitely saw a lot of, which is, dude, you forgot about this card. You forgot Ancestral Recall. How could you forget about Ancestral Recall? You forgot this card like Upstart Goblin or Maxi, or you forgot Original Bill. Original Bill was a trainer card, which you can play as many as you want. Well, alright, stay tuned. I'll make videos on cards like this. Cards were about cards that we draw to in the standard metagame. It was more talking about how the normal cards would see play in their standard metagames at the time when the card was printed. Which is why I specifically got the bill that was listed as a supporter card to support, my claims about how draw changes were bad. So if you want me to make videos about powerful card draw effects in card games, I'd love to. If you want to leave a comment about that, go ahead. And also we got some card game connoisseurs in the chat, which I absolutely love. Here's an example of a Pokemon or a list of a player that just goes over many, many different card games that I didn't talk about and I would absolutely love to talk about. We got One Piece, we got Shadowverse, Flesh and Blood, Vanguard, White Schwartz. This is it, going over all of them, and some people talking about Netrunner. I talk about Legends of Runeterra, tons of amazing indie or more developed card games out there, young, old, new. It's very refined to have all these card games in mind, and I would love reading the comments of people talking about them, and I would love to do videos about them in the future. However, all these main videos, I just want to go over the big four card games to kind of get my style and getting into it, and then I would love to make videos about other card games in the future. That being said, I did get also a lot of comments talking about how I missed the Draw 2 Uno, and yeah, you got me. I mean, Draw 2 Uno was like basically the best
Well,
card ever.
I forgot
Draw 2
about
was like
Sprite
one
Up's
Uno,
protection from effects thing. Ah! This card is literally pointless now. Oh, well, fuck. Sprite Up's protections. My back row! I am an idiot! That is why you wait until main phase 2 to set your back row. Let me just go ahead and do this already now as well. May as well put it all in one recording. This is the TCG version of my deck. Honestly, not a fan of the barrier statues and stuff. Because they're basically hard going first. If I don't go first, then these cards are basically useless. Maybe I'll consider replacing them. I'll replace them right now. Hmm. Anything in the side deck I'd rather have be in the main deck or something. Try evenly matched again. Hmm. Not sure if I'd want to do this on my Master Duel account as well. I'm gonna do it right now.
I have found that, given the proper incentive, anyone can be made to play my game. Look at you, the first move and already you're nervous. It's a duelist like me before. I know everything before you can even make it.
So I got rid of Watafon on accident.
This is the year of Yu-Gi-Oh! For me. With me talking about more of the various subjects of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise, like characters like Jack Atlas and Crow Hogan, fuck you, Crow. I'm talking about the various video games that came out years ago. It's been a wonderful walk down memory lane for this series. Before I might talk about the old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Games that are mostly focused on the original series of Yu-Gi-Oh!
Should I try Forbidden Droplet instead?
About the initial series all that much. Most I did was talk about the ladies of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how their writing was not that great, and that it should be what I talk about. Although I reckon that my channel isn't all negative, I do want people to understand that there are positive aspects to the entire series of Yu-Gi-Oh! And I figured that since I love to talk about villains on this channel, whether it be or this guy. And of course, I love talking about villains here. Hell, they're probably my favorite videos to make, and I think we should continue this trend and mix it with the topic of Yu-Gi-Oh! So you got yourself an interesting selection of villains to choose from. I obviously do have my issues with each Yu-Gi-Oh! Series, but there's one thing I can always compliment, it's the villains in them. Of course, if I really had to pick a villain who I think was probably the best, it'd have to be the first.
Tell me something, my old friend. Did you like watching cartoons in your youth? Is that it? God, we were even more cold-hearted than I thought. For me, they were the absolute best. And none was closer to my heart than the misadventures of one tricky hare.
Maximilian Pegasus. That's right. The first major antagonist of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. And in my opinion, probably one of the most iconic villains of not only Yu-Gi-Oh! But anime as well. I'm on the comment, and join me as we go back to the past to talk about Yu-Gi-Oh!'s greatest villain, Pegasus.
I took your grandpa soul. I looked incredible.
Maximilian Pegasus, more known as Pegasus J. Crawford in the manga, is the breakout from Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, and boy, does he make an impression with his looks. Just a look at the character's design, it actually tends to be rather out there, especially when it comes to shonen anime. That's because Yu-Gi-Oh! At its core is a show about two characters punching each other and throwing energy blasts.
I think I can get away with
Well, most of the time, no. Yu-Gi-Oh!, at least the original, is
going
all
for
about
like this in
well, the name of the
TCG.
game is strategy, so wearing fancy clothes does make sense. You don't need to worry about getting your clothes caught when you're playing a card game or people pulling your hair in a fight. So when you look at Pegasus with his long silver hair which covers half of his face and his bright red suit, the character catches your eye. In comparison to that of the main character's coloring, his outfit at the time had these blacks and blues, with his hair being colorful. It sets up a very good contrast with the main character. It also just stands out from other villains. Pegasus' design, although simple with his basic colors of silver and red, is a good combination that makes it memorable. His design is subtle, and that's what makes Pegasus honestly a lot more notable. In the context of the story of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pegasus is the creator of the game Duel Monsters, designing the rules of the game and having the fondness of games and cartoons, which we'll get back to later. There's not a lot of information of Pegasus' creation as a character, and I don't know if there's going to be more to get at this point, so we'll focus on Pegasus' backstory for this section. Born to a wealthy casino tycoon, the young Pegasus was well off. He had to be, since his father owned a lot of casinos. One night when Pegasus was 10 and he was attending one of his father's parties in Las Vegas, Pegasus met Cecilia, the girl who would become the love of Pegasus' life. Love at first sight. Though we don't know too much about their relationship, we do know that when they were in their mid-teens, the two had decided to live together. Pegasus would often paint her portraits, and if you're talking about the English dub, the two were actually married. However, tragedy struck when Cecilia passed away from an illness at the age of 17. Unable to accept the death of his loved one, Pegasus scoured the world in order to find any method of reviving the dead. Ever for someone in love. The Egyptians believed the afterlife caught Pegasus' attention, though, so his travels led him to the tombs where the Millennium Items were held, where he met Shadi, the guardian of the Millennium Items, who warned him that his solution to death would not be in the tomb. Not heeding Shadi's warnings, Pegasus followed him, and as such,
Against his wishes. So I thought. Although it seemed to lead to the bowels of the earth, still I followed.
after that impromptu eye surgery, Pegasus was raised to the vision of Cecilia, and when he held her in his arms,
Cecilia.
Motherfucking.
I did it long last. But be warned. Seeing's not the same as touching. Damn it, poor kids! What in the world is with that sound effect? I should point out the original Japanese, it was pretty clear that Pegasus had lost his eye and had blood streaming down his face. And there was a much more dignified sound effect for this scene. It's still kind of goofy, but has a lot more meaning, like the happiness that Pegasus got was snuffed out. But then you exploded again. You really need to stop doing that. Regardless of terrible editing choices, after his eye was replaced, Pegasus began his plan to provide his lover. The first thing he did was establish industrial illusions, and after a second trip to Egypt, Pegasus discovered the Shadow Games and based his and because of that, the businessman was able to create the world's greatest card game. A game so impressive that the landscape of the world was changed to revolve around these mighty cards, all done with 7 years. Although at this point, Pegasus also had magical abilities that allowed him to read people's minds and steal souls, so that probably helped too. Capitalism at its finest, folks. Still, Pegasus' plan was in the works, and during that time, he
Damn it.
corporation to develop virtual simulation technology, which would allow dual monsters to be a more enhanced experience. And with the advent of solid vision tech from Kyber Corp, that sparked an idea in Pegasus' mind. You see, solid vision had the ability to create holographic projections that were more lifelike, and the holograms could even inflict damage to people at some points. So, with a combination of magic and technology, Pegasus hatched his plan, and the timing couldn't be better. Around this time, Seto Kaba, the uncontested champion on Duel Monsters, was defeated by an upstart with some oddly shaped hair. So, making a deal with the bigwigs of Kaiba Corp, Pegasus attempted to overthrow Seto Kaiba so he could take over the company and get his hands on the technology. A man who not only made his own company, got magic powers, and even managed to establish a hostile takeover of one of the world's greatest tech companies. Not bad for a 23-year-old guy. Yeah, Pegasus is 24 years old. Surprised me too! I do want to point out that while Pegasus is a villain, he does have a backstory that is really understandable. I'm sure at one point or another
They
we've lost
didn't
someone
attack?
we
The hell?
truly cared about, and we'll do anything we could in order to save them or get them back. It was at the cost of another person. Oh, he just gave you back your gun. Well, we can't have that one chance. Of course, the backstory for a villain is only one element to creating a great villain. What we need to really consider is how Pegasus presents himself, as a character and as a threat. If we're following the anime, we're introduced to Pegasus in the very first episode after Kaiba's. Of course, when the anime first aired and most people weren't familiar with the Yu-Gi-Oh manga, he was a mysterious figure. It won't be until the second episode that we get an actual introduction to Pegasus, where he's probably introduced as the eccentric millionaire who created the very game of the entire series. So let's know where it stops. In the same episode, our protagonist Yugimoto receives a videotape and an invitation to the Duelist Kingdom tournament, and thanks to his magical abilities, Pegasus challenged Yuki to a duel using a VHS best tape. On time limit, mind you, but still a duel, and Pegasus wins. Yes, it was by timeout. But hey, anyone who plays Speedstrip nowadays kind of plays that way. You can tell the age of Pegasus is a long gone, but this damn wins. And protagonist of the show in the second episode, not just to be Yugi, but thanks to his abilities to read his mind with his Millennium Eye, Pegasus was able to counter a lot of Yugi's moves. Now, you can't just chalk that up to Pegasus. Yugi's next move would have to be. Instead, what Pegasus did was prep his deck for cards that Yugi could use, like Dragon Trap to stop zombies. There was more prep made for the duel. Yes, Pegasus did win the time limit, but he still did win. And because of that, he was able to establish himself as a very unique threat, especially when he showed he was able to steal people's process. I really love this introduction of Pegasus. How many villains can we say that are able to pull off an introduction like this? Not only is he able to appear in such an unconventional manner via VHS tape, but is also able to get the upper hand on the main character so early in the series. Pegasus establishes himself as a very indomitable threat. And even though he does prepare, the biggest danger is his Millennium Eye, which allows him to steal souls, create shadow games, and of course,
Triunga Bunga.
mind scanning ability, which is actually a pretty brilliant power when your entire show is based on a card game.
where you can see what your is and understand what their strategy will be, planning for it and dealing with it. And with Pegasus stealing the soul of Yugi's grandfather, it provides a great motivation for Yugi to compete in the Duelist Kingdom tournament. That's a fresh air when it comes to taking someone the protagonist cares about. And it isn't the main love interest. Hooray for equality! And throughout the tournament, Pegasus has this air of indomitable power. He's literally the king of the hill, given more reason to see how dangerous an opponent Pegasus is.
I can sense you, Kaiba. But are you hunting for me? Or am I hunting you?
There's the story that Kaiba tells where he elicits that how at a very tournament, Pegasus literally treated the champion Bandit Keith as nothing more than a plaything. Pegasus literally wrote down some notes and called a kid over to play in his stead.
What do you do? Asking for help's illegal. I don't need help. A child could defeat you, Bandit Keith, and I'm going to prove it.
But I just started to learn how to play last.
Just follow these instructions and you'll win.
And in a stunning upset, the kid managed to beat Bandit Keith. With the note that Pegasus left the kid to beat the American Intercontinental Champion. The next time was when Pegasus faces off against Kaiba. Still with his powers of the Millennium Eye, Pegasus was able to counteract almost all of Kaiba's moves, even to the point where he was able to steal one of Kaiba's blue-eyed white dragons.
Tell me I was right. I was right, right? So hope I was right. Enough! Here, take it! Now the most valuable card in your deck.
I'm forced into attack. I'm forced to attack.
A combo that was used to severely cripple Yugi's deck in the duo's match against Kaiba.
And it's too late for him to do a single thing about it.
Hurry up and call up your attack, Kaiba! It's a trap!
I'm afraid this is far worse than a trap.
I'd also like to point out that earlier in this duel, Kaiba had come to the realization that Pegasus was playing cards from mind reading.
Don't top deck dimension shifter again. I'll accept it. Bullshit. I can't compete against meta decks. I think I'm just gonna go play Minecraft now.